So I watched an older movie, it's not old, like ancient old. It's from 2022 and it's called No Exit on Hulu. And it is about a woman that is struggling with substance abuse named Darby. And she is in rehab when she finds out that her mother is sick and she is going to have a life threatening procedure. And it is going to be very soon, like within the next day. And her call that she received at rehab was just notifying her of that. Now, she technically cannot leave rehab. It sounds like it's court mandated, so she has to be there. But she ends up sneaking out by first using someone's cell phone to get further information, just how like emergent it is for her to get out of rehab. And then she ends up breaking out. She steals a couple of things out of the closet and she ends up stealing one of the workers' cars who, when she looks in the car, they have substances in the visor. It's like, pot calling kettle. But anyway, she ends up getting stuck in a snowstorm and she ends up being rerouted to a shelter to get through the storm. And she ends up in the shelter with Ash, Sandy, Lars, Ed, and it's just coming down. There's no way she can drive because she's in like a little sports car. I really can tell if it was like a Camaro because it's a lot of snow, so you can't really clearly see the vehicles. So while she's walking out and she's trying to find reception, she hears a disturbing noise and realizes that there's a little girl in one of the vans of the people that are in the shelter with her. And she knows she can't just run back in the shelter and say, hey, there's a little girl. So she's trying to calm the girl down and let her know that she's going to help her. She'll be right back. So while they're in the shelter, they start playing a card game called Bullshit. And you find out a little bit about the couples. So Sandy and Ed are a couple that are on their way on a gambling trip, and Ed used to be in the military. And you find out that's what Darby and Ed have in common because Darby's father was in the military, but he unfortunately unalived himself. Darby's father did. Um, Ash and Lars, we don't really get much information on them. But once she gets done with the game of bullshit, she ends up finding in one of the restrooms that is being renovated. So she ends up finding a passageway out of the side of that restroom that's being renovated. And she's trying to just go out there and check on the little girl again and make sure, that she knows, like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. Well, while she's in the van, she covers herself under, it looks like some type of tarp or blanket, and she realizes that Lars, who's a very odd man, is the kidnapper, and he's talking to her like how I'm talking, like, oh, it's totally fine, it's cold, you're gonna be okay, we're gonna get through this. So we figured out what's going on. So Darby ends up back in the building and she's trying to get help. So she corners Ash and talks to him about it, and she wants to get help. So she kisses him. It's kind of like a ploy to make it look like that it's something going on between them, but it's really not. Well, come to find out, Lars and Ash are in it together. They're actually brothers, and they are trying to take this little girl to traffic her to their uncle, who is a human trafficker. So we pretty much early on realized that we're cooked. So eventually they end up cornering, but like passive aggressively. It's very tense. It's a very tense movie, by the way. And they let Darby know that we're on to you, and Darby lets them know they're on to her, but she can't include Ed and Sandy because she doesn't want to endanger their lives. So at some point, there's a little bit of an altercation, and Ed's like feeling the palpable tension, like something's not right here. Something, the math's not math in here. Something, I don't like Lars. What's going on with him? So they go outside and they keep giving BS reasons why they're outside, but essentially the little girl ends up getting out and running, and they make Darby help them look for her, and Darby ends up like falling down the hill, and when she fell, I'm like, I don't think she's recovering. How's she getting up this? Darby goes through a lot. physically. I'm like, this is a very physical film. So hand or my hat off to the character. And her real name is Havana Rose Liu. And odd thing is that her parents are actually the creators of The Knot. If you're familiar with planning a wedding or trying to get help or information as far as wedding or party planning, that's a website you can use. So I thought that was just like a fun fact. But anyway, back to the movie. So they end up eventually back in the between all this like back and forth wrestle. That's the only complaint I had. I felt like there was some parts that was just a little too much like additive. I'm like, we could have like left that part out. So eventually the little girl, and we find out her name is Jay, is in the building and she needs help immediately because Darby noticed when she was in the van that she had a medical um, emergency bracelet on. And we come to find out that she has a disorder where if it's too much excitement, the hormones release actually could kill her. So she needs medicine ASAP. So when we get in the building and the little girl's laying on the ground, she looks up and Sandy's trying to calm her down. And we realize that Jay knows Sandy. Jay is the child of the family that Sandy used to clean their house. So she set this whole thing up because apparently her and Ed are having financial issues. And I don't get the whole backstory about why they have financial issues. I don't know if Ed's gambling because at the beginning of the film, Ed discusses how much he likes to gamble or how much he likes poker. So he didn't necessarily say gamble, but he does love poker and card games. So Sandy starts crying and breaking down and saying, this is going to be what saved us. This is what going to get us financially back on track. And Ed's like, oh, what did you do? But they don't get that much time to go back and forth about it because Sandy does eventually give Jay the medicine. And then the brothers end up killing Jay and Sandy. There can't be any witnesses. But in one of their wrestlings back and forth, Darby dropped the keys in the bathroom that was under construction. So that's the only saving grace that is keeping Darby alive at the moment. So they're like, where are the keys? Give me the keys. And she's not giving it up. So this is graphic. So if you get like grossed out easily, I would skip like the next like 10 seconds. So they put Darby's wrist against a wall and they take a nail gun and they nail her to the wall. And they do not skip a detail. It is very graphic. It is very creepy. It is very weird. It grossed me out. And I have a strong stomach, but because out of like the 20 jobs I have had, one was in the medical field in orthopedics. So I've got a pretty strong, but that part, they almost lost me. So Darby is nailed against the wall and she is like obviously in shock and a lot of pain and they want those keys. So then they threaten the little girl. Well, Jay hits the nail gun in Ash's hand and it dislodges and it hits his brother Lars in the head and then Lars falls forward further puncturing his head with the nail and he instantly dies. So she is like, I'm cooked. I don't know what to do. So eventually, in another wrestling, they like to wrestle in this film, she ends up grabbing a hammer on the floor and removing, well, let me take that back. She ends up sniffing some of the rugs that she found in the car and to help with the pain. And then she removes the nail with the end of a hammer. So she eventually gets outside because they wrestle. They love to wrestle in this movie. And she wrestles her way into the car and they're getting ready to leave. But then the police officer pulls up that directed her to the shelter. And I was nervous at first. I'm like, is he in on this too? This whole trafficking thing? But he's not. And unfortunately, Ash kills him. Well, then they finally have one final showdown. And I was like, I think it's going to be one of those horror movies where the good guy ends up dying because he starts choking her and she was and let me rewind that back. The cop shoots her and then Ash shoots the cop with the nail gun. Sorry. Lost my spot there. So after he gets the cop with the nail gun, he goes to Darby and he starts choking her, and you think he's getting right, like this is it, like this is done. Well, there's a knife in the car, and she ends up stabbing Ash, and he ends up dying, and then she's laying out, but she does crawl her way to the police officer, and she pulls his walkie-talkie and she calls for help. So then we fast forward to her back in rehab, and she is 49 days sober, and she looks healthy. We don't get much closure other than that. I am happy that she survived. Thought it was an interesting idea for a movie. It was a good time burn. Not my favorite movie, and not that like, oh my gosh, it was so great and written so well, but it was a good movie. And like I said, we get a little bit of closure. We don't really find out what we no, we don't find out what happens to Jay or anything like that. But Ash does, or I mean, not Ash. Darby does survive. By the way, I really like the name Darby. Super cute. Super unique. But yeah, that's all I got. Bye.